Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to take a look at the build review on the Dynam C-47. While I was doing a little research preparing for this build series, I found an interesting quote by A.G. Leonard Morgan from the United States Army Air Force. He said, "The C-47 groaned, it protested, it rattled, it leaked oil, it ran hot, it ran cold, it ran rough, it staggered along on hot days and scared you half to death. Its wings flexed and twisted in a horrifying manner. It sank back to earth with a great sigh of relief, but it flew and it flew and it flew." And I got to be honest with you, I think Dynam's trying to keep up with traditions on this one. Let me explain why. None of the issues I encountered were deal breakers. The plane's ready to fly, and I'm going to fly it. So let's start with that as ground zero, right? So nothing here is a deal breaker. Nothing's going to prevent it from getting in the air. Now that said, there were a couple of things that could have been done better, and there were a couple of things I could have done better. Let's start out with the glue. On this plane, you have to glue the tail surfaces on, and they use contact cement. And had I thought about it, or in retrospect, if I had it to do again, I would use hot glue. So there's a seam right here for the tail feathers where the vertical stabilizer drops in, and you have to glue it from here all the way down to this tip. The problem with that is that there's no real easy way to put any kind of clamping mechanism down without possibly damaging the phone. What I wound up doing was using a couple of T-pins. I put them in at crosses, so one here, and that held the tip in, but I still had to hold the tail down in order to wait for the glue to set up. In hindsight, I wish I would have just used hot glue. Hot glue would have done the job just fine. So little bead of hot glue down there, pop the thing in, I would have been done in a few seconds. Same thing with the wing. You have to glue the wing together, same deal. I would have rather, looking back on it now, I should have just used hot glue. Instead, I used the contact cement, and I had to sit there and hold those wings and keep them, keep the leading edge and the trailing edge lined up so that the wing remained true and square. And it took a while. So in retrospect, hot glue, that would have been the ticket. Okay, during the unbox, if you remember or if you saw that video, I made a comment when I was looking at the hardware that the hardware came with an extra set of prop adapters. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Just in case you nick one up, you've got a spare. Well, I found a really good place to store them. Right there. It just so happens by putting both of those prop nuts in those little cubbies right there, the thing balanced perfectly at the manufacturer's recommendation. I think it's 60 to 65 millimeters. I split the difference, so that's about 62.5. And that's where I balanced it. With those two in there, it balanced perfectly. So no harm, no foul. That's the way you got to look at it. While I'm in the cockpit, one other thing I want to show you, and I noticed this during the build review, when I had the canopy cover on, or the cockpit cover on, I noticed a white seam on the foam where they cut it. And that's not a manufacturing flaw, it's just the nature of painting EPO foam. Well, here's a quick little pro tip I'll show you. Get yourself a black Sharpie, and you can see all I did was I just took a Sharpie just like this, and I ran it along that edge all the way around the edge. And I did the same thing on the airplane itself. Just by taking a black Sharpie and running it along the edge like this, it gets rid of that white, that very visible white seam that you get out of the box. Okay, one of the more unfortunate things, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to deal with it yet, but I think, assuming everything goes okay with the plane, that I will wind up dealing with it because it's just my nature. I don't know if you can see it or not, but that prop nut, it spins. The shaft is bent. So on this motor, the shaft is definitely not quite right. I don't consider that a manufacturing defect. I don't think that's a problem in the manufacturer. I think it was something that must have happened somewhere in handling, because this one is perfect. I don't see any problems at all. It's nice and quiet when I spin it up. So it's just one of those things. The unfortunate part is they use a proprietary shaft. So getting that fixed, it's not going to be straightforward. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to fly the plane and I'll deal with it at some other time. But for now, this goes back to what A.G. Leonard Morgan from the United States Army Air Force has said. It moaned, it groaned, it ran hot, it ran rough. So my C-47 is not going to be any exception. That's going to be a little loud, maybe a little vibraty. But we're going to deal with that for the maiden. Okay, next thing up that I want to talk about real quickly are decals. Now, this isn't a build issue or a quality issue or anything. The point is simple, and that's that you've got a lot of them. And you have really challenging scenarios like these windows that have to be put in their spot, but they also have to be square and level. You don't want them tilted. One little tip that I'll give you that I use, mine's not perfect, but it's pretty good. At 2 feet away, it looks fine. But one little tip that I'll give you, when you're putting on decals and you're really working on being square and true, get yourself a hobby knife. Just imagine this is my hobby knife. And then you stick the decal on the flat edge of that hobby knife, and you use that hobby knife to kind of angle and get the angle you want. And then once you have it, you put your thumb on the bottom, stick it on there, and then pull your hobby knife. You have to pull it out a little bit, but pull your hobby knife out and finish off the decal application. That's the best way I've been able to find to do it. Now, if I have a balsa plane, that's different, right? I use water and soap, and I move the decals around until I get them where I want, and then I squeegee them out. But you can't do that on EPO. So, and if you use tape or any kind of guidelines, you run the risk of taking the paint off. So, again, it's not a gripe, but just a warning that this airplane has a lot of decals. You got 6 on each side. Is it 6? It's 7. 7 on each side. Yeah. Plus you got the cockpit windows, and they have to be square. Plus you got the invasion stripes. So just take your time. That's the moral of the story. Take your time putting on the decals. Okay, on the rudder, we're going to get into control surfaces now because I have a lot to tell you about here. But on the rudder, the seam down here was very, very tight. I ended up having to take a hobby knife and just kind of hogging that out a little bit, because before I did that, when I'd operate the rudder, the control rod out here was flexing out, and that's no good. So I found that was the problem. It was binding down here on the seam. So I kind of carved that out again, and then I took my Sharpie and went and colored it back in again. So again, it's not a big deal, but just be aware of it. You want those control surfaces to move completely free. You don't want any binding, because if you do, you're making more work for your servo, you're tensioning your control rods, you're weakening the joint that's holding the push rod sleeves in place. Nothing good about that. Now the next thing that I got to show you is what I consider to be the biggest issue with the plane, and it absolutely needs to be corrected. Don't fly the plane without solving this issue, because I'm not real thrilled that this came to me this way, but I've been flying long enough to know that what I saw was not good, and I had the techniques and understanding on how to deal with it. So let me just pop this screw off real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Oh, and by the way, while I do this, the beauty cover that goes on the bottom of the wing in between the landing gear, I did not glue mine in. I did that because I want to fly it first and make sure I don't have any issues, because if you glue that cover in and you do have a problem, it's going to be a real hot mess trying to, number one, get it apart. See, here's the cover I'm talking about. If you glue that in, it's going to be a real challenge to get it apart, and then you're probably going to damage stuff and scrape the bejesus out of the bottom of the thing. So I kind of wish they would have done magnets. That would have made a lot more sense to me if they'd have put some magnets in the bottom of there. I might even try that myself, but anyway. One other thing on the decals, notice I didn't put invasion stripes on the bottom. It's not because I'm trying to disrespect the plane. I understand that they do have invasion stripes on the bottom. I did it for orientation purposes, because this is a very dark airplane, and I wanted this profile of the wing to be very different from this profile of the wing. And by just doing invasion stripes on the top, I'll get that. Okay, let's get to my complaint. Here's the issue. This is the elevator control rod sleeve, and when they glued that in, they used one little dollop of glue back there in the back corner. Can you see that? Right there in the back corner, this rounded section of the bulkhead, one little dollop of glue. The problem was that when I was adjusting my linkages, the sleeve was a little too far back on the tail back here. Where the push rod meets the control horn, the sleeve was just a little bit too long. So while I was trying to adjust that in order to get full range of motion, it popped loose. And when it popped loose, I started looking into this situation and realized that they really only had one little dollop of glue holding the elevator sleeve to the airframe. Now the problem with that is if that thing comes loose, you're going to lose your elevator. That's bad. So what I ended up doing was I took a gift card and I made myself a little, I don't know what you call it. I made myself a little sleeve to go right here, and I cut a hole in it so the push rod guide tube could fit in the hole. And then I put a little slice in the servo bulkhead. I stuffed it in there and I hot glued it. I poured the glue on. Now that's not going anywhere. That's locked in nice and tight. And that's the way this should have been done from the factory. Really, that's kind of not a good scenario, because if that thing pops off on its own while you're flying, you stand a real good chance of losing your airplane. And by the way, same type of issue on the two rudder linkages. One goes to the rudder, the tail wheel, and one goes to the rudder. Same issue. I had to pour some glue on the bulkhead where the sleeve meets the bulkhead in order to keep those from flexing as well. And when I did that, all of a sudden, my control surfaces started going to full deflection like they're supposed to. So that to me is a quality miss that they really probably need to figure out a way to address in upcoming iterations of this plane. But that control sleeve, that where the elevator goes in, that needs to be firm. That there can't be any play in that, or risk of losing it. All right, guys, that about covers the build review on the C-47. I will be mating this very soon, so look out for the video on that. Everything regarding the aesthetic on this plane that I commented on in the unbox video holds true. I mean, the lines on this plane are just beautiful. And I know when I go mating this plane, it's not going to be a rocket ship. I'm not going to be doing loops and rolls, but you know what? That's not what this plane is about. This is the joy in this plane comes in going out and doing things like flying scale, you know, doing that scale takeoff and the scale climb out and just enjoying it in the air without going, you know, crazy with every kind of maneuver in the book. This is one of those planes where you just go out and just take it easy a little bit and just enjoy the beauty that is flying RC planes. If you want to do 100 miles an hour with your hair on fire, you get something like this, right? This thing is a maniac in the sky. I mean, this thing is, it's terrifying. It goes fast, crazy fast, and burns up the sky. And you know, there's a time and a place for that. That's not what this plane is, though. So the Maiden, don't expect a lot. It's just going to fly circles. It's going to be fun. It'll be enjoyable. It'll be relaxing, and it'll be, you know what it'll be? It'll be nostalgic. That's what this plane is. It's about being nostalgic, and it's about remembering the past. So I can't wait to fly this plane. I think it's beautiful. I think it's got beautiful lines. I'm very happy to have it. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the video series on the C-47 so far as much as I have. Don't forget about Bitco Hobby. They're our sponsor for the video. They're the ones that provided the airplane. If you're in the market for Dynam airplanes or Decals radio equipment, make sure you give them a look. They've got a good website with a good inventory, and they'll be happy to help you out. That's all I've got for tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video so far. Keep a lookout for the Maiden. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And if you are a subscriber and you don't have that notification bell, make sure you do that so you know when new material hits the channel. All right, guys, that's all I've got for tonight. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care.